I don't understand the younger generation. They don't seem to want to work.
Mm-hmm.
And
do you think
I couldn't wait to work.
We have associated drudgery with work, all work.
It's not fulfilling.
We've made work the proximate cause of our collective unhappiness. We believe today that job satisfaction has something to do with the job, and it really doesn't. Job satisfaction has something to do with the job, but a whole lot more to do with the person. And if you start to look at work like this thing, that's separate and apart from the man or the woman, then you sort of arbitrage the fun out of it. Have you taken the time to think about your relationship with work, right? Like, to really think about it. Have you made it the enemy? Have you suggested, perhaps, that it's the proximate cause of whatever unhappiness you have in your life? Most people have. So the idea of quietly quitting, I'm sure, is very appealing to a lot of people because they don't have to step up and do it publicly. You don't have to risk being ostracized or shamed.
Gen Z is prioritizing their mental health at work, but anchors at Fox News are asking that age-old question, why doesn't anyone want to work anymore? I'm Yasmin Khan with Rebel HQ, and it really is an age-old question. We've seen documented evidence through old news reports or newspaper headlines that proclaim no one wants to work anymore. Every single generation has had to deal with accusations of being lazy or entitled in the workplace. And I would know, I'm a millennial. And as a millennial, I never thought that to be a fair assessment. Millennials are the most educated and least paid generation that this country has ever seen, with 10% more millennials holding college degrees than the previous generation. We came up during several cultural shifts, not to mention the economic setbacks that the older generation saddled us with and expected us to just kind of deal with. And we did. We dealt with the unpaid internships and the predatory student loans with their crippling interest rates. We dealt with multiple recessions and economic setbacks, a housing bubble, and a failed banking system. We dealt with an oversaturated job market and jobs that didn't pay enough to keep up with exorbitant inflation. We got master's degrees, PhDs, and certifications, all which we paid for, just in the hopes that it would give us a leg up over the competition, helping us to impress future employers and command bigger salaries. We did this all the while being called lazy and entitled by people who never had to deal with any of that, all the while being shamed for still living at home or with multiple roommates when the older generation screwed up the housing market, all the while being called soft and being told to suck it up when our collective mental health understandably and inevitably deteriorated because we were working so hard to build some kind of equity in a society that seemed insistent on holding us back at every turn. We've pivoted industries, we found ways to make social media and technology work for us, we started our own businesses. We kept trying things until something stuck, and many of us are still trying. But yeah, we're lazy. Now workers are quiet quitting, which is a bit of a misnomer because it doesn't mean that people are actually quitting their jobs. They're just no longer interested in doing more than is required of them for little or nothing in return. And who can blame them? Well, the people over at Fox News can, because quiet quitting is anti-capitalistic in nature.
We've just asked millions and millions and millions of people who have worked really, really hard from the moment they got out of high school, who have built businesses, who create jobs. We're asking those people to write the check for $1.7 trillion in outstanding student loans from people who went another way, who made another choice. You want to talk about forgiveness? Fine, I forgive you. But I'm not going to forget, and I'm certainly not going to pay it off.
It's like the scene in Office Space when Jennifer Aniston's character got reprimanded for only doing what was asked of her, even though she'd sufficiently done what had been asked of her. In that movie, her character worked in a chain restaurant. It was just a job to her. She was a worker, not a unique or valued asset to the company. She wasn't looking to put more of herself into a job that she didn't care about or didn't care about her. A job is a contract. Someone needs something to get done, so someone else says, I'll do it for you if you pay me to do it. That's it. So much of the culture here in the United States is based on work. The old saying is that in this country, if you work hard enough, you can achieve anything. If you work hard enough, you can eventually climb someone else's ladder, making millions of dollars for that someone while taking home thousands for yourself. If you work hard enough and do everything asked of you and then some, if you sacrifice every other aspect of what comprises a life for your meaningless and unfulfilling job, if you make work your life and prioritize productivity above literally everything else, then you've got a shot at really hitting it big. Hitting it big, of course, means earning a ton of money. It doesn't necessarily mean that you'll have a nice or happy life. But we all know what the reality is. Our family structures are crumbling, our societal goals are rooted in economics rather than what's actually best for society. Our people are physically unhealthy and inactive and mentally unstable, stressed, and anxious. And we're disappointed. The millennial generation, and even more so with Gen Z, should have been able to reap all of the benefits technology had to offer us, including the luxury of being able to do more while working less. That was always the goal, or rather the promise of technology. It was supposed to make everyone's lives easier. We don't have to manually plow fields anymore, so we don't have to spend as much time on that particular task. I don't need to go to a library to do research anymore, and yes, millennials grew up doing research out of books. So all of that time that I save by using the internet should be time that I've earned back. But instead, our made-up time just got taken from us again, filled up with other tasks, other goals, other things that we were told we had to do just so we could fill up an antiquated and arbitrary 40-hour work week, because the goal of capitalism is growth at all costs. If you're not growing, you're failing, you're collapsing. Apparently, someone sitting or enjoying a moment to themselves is a luxury to be enjoyed by the very wealthy only.
A story about quiet quitting has been the #1 most read story all week long at the Wall Street Journal's website. The Journal also recently reported that some are exploiting remote work to hold multiple jobs, getting paid to be mediocre at 2 jobs instead of being good at 1. Axios has labeled all of this the new anti-work movement, a rebellion against rise and grind. A recent Gallup survey found that employee engagement in the United States is falling across all generations, but especially among younger Americans. Among those born after 1989, 54% call themselves not engaged, meaning they'll show up to do the minimum required, but not much else.
When younger generations got to the office, they didn't see the point of sitting at a desk for 40 hours because so many workplace tasks simply don't take as long as they used to, thanks to technological advancements and smart automations. The job would still get done, but older generations didn't like the way that we did it. I remember at an old job that I had, I used to just make myself look more stressed out than I actually was, just so that my bosses would think that I was working harder than I needed to. Either way, my job got done and my bosses thought I was a great worker. A friend of mine maybe worked only 10 hours a week at his corporate job because he was able to automate so much of his processes. By doing this, he was able to exercise more, cook more, spend more time with his family, learn how to play the guitar, and his superiors were none the wiser because the job got done whether or not he was sitting in a chair for 40 hours a week. In fact, he's since been promoted several times in no small part because of his output and his efficiency. But growth at all costs, right? Job creation rather than job elimination is still a key performance indicator that we either praise or fault presidents for, and for now, that's the way it's gotta be because we haven't structured our society in such a way that it allows for people to not work as much despite having the means to do so. And before any Republicans or libertarians get upset about how entitled the Democrats are, this argument has less to do with politics and more to do with sociology. And if a society like this ever gets implemented, it would benefit everyone immensely in more ways than I care to list right now. Of course, I'm talking in big picture terms too, and there would have to be a lot that gets sorted out on the micro level should something like this come to fruition on a large scale. Now that said, I'm not optimistic that we'll get there anytime soon, if ever, because our culture doesn't allow for it. Andrew Yang, as problematic as he is, was onto something when he said everyone should just get money from the government. And the notion of a universal basic income is too controversial for most people to even consider, even hypothetically. The reason that I'm not optimistic, though, is because growth at all costs. It would mean that people, or rather corporations, would be satisfied with a certain level of output. It would mean that people would be okay with maybe having a little less, even if it meant they wouldn't have to chase more for the rest of their lives. It wouldn't mean that you don't have the potential or the possibility to earn more if you really wanted to. but it would mean that the overall quality of life for most members of society would be elevated substantially, at the very least because we wouldn't have arcane expectations being put upon us regarding how we spend our time. It would mean that most, if not all of us, would be able to directly benefit from the prosperity we all help to build in some form or other. We're the richest country in the world, but so many of us are one paycheck away from being homeless. It would mean that our culture could elevate beyond cubicles and freezing office buildings because people would actually be free to be themselves, to harness their skills and talents, explore the arts, get healthy, spend time with their loved ones, be generally happier than we are now, and ultimately contribute to society in a more meaningful and individualistic way. So one last aspect of this that I'll quickly mention is how little satisfaction we get from our jobs. Today, a few of us are fortunate enough to work in fields that we actually care about, and a few of us are able to derive a sense of accomplishment from the work that we do. Most of us, however, just convince ourselves that we're really passionate about accounting and supply chains. Now, that aside, if you go back to Ford's assembly line, it was hailed as a job creator. It was hailed for how many cars the business model was able to produce in so little time. It was capitalistic innovation at its finest, but on the flip side, it reduced human beings with talents, ideas, personalities, and passions to literal cogs on a wheel. It stripped us of our sense of accomplishment, and it removed us from the process of creation. Artisanry was out the window, along with any pride one might have taken in their societal contributions. It gave us jobs, but not careers, and certainly not lives. Now, Gen Z is just the latest generation to grapple with obsolescence in the workplace, among other things. The problems the millennials had to deal with and are still dealing with are now being passed on to them, problems that have been compounded by another economic crisis, a worsening climate crisis, and, of course, an unprecedented global pandemic. Honestly, the expectations and the retributions of the older generations shouldn't even be relevant or worthwhile commentary at this point because they simply don't know what they're talking about anymore. And what's worse, they're holding everyone else back by insisting on 40+ hours of pointless labor in the name of some CEO that most workers will never even get to meet. You can't blame them for wanting more for themselves. All right, that's it for me, but there's so much more that can and should be discussed on this topic. I'm sure you'll all do just that in the comments section. So yes, please comment, but also like and subscribe if you got something out of this content. And also, please do me a favor and follow me over on Instagram and TikTok. Thanks so much for being here.